Well, welcome everybody. Muy bienvenidos a todos. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Faris, and I'm the county superintendent. And it really is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to our education town hall. We have some very, very special guests that are going to be speaking with us. Me gustaría dar la bienvenida a todos a nuestro foro de exploración ambiental, de justicia ambiental, perdón. This idea of exploring environmental justice is something that is at the core of what we are about at the County Office of Education. Is something that we believe wholeheartedly as one of the many branches of our work for equity, for disrupting inequitable practices, for building anti-racist societies and communities, and to bring our community together to fight for justice and fight injustice wherever it stands. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight. I have some announcements I'd like to make. Me gustaría dar la bienvenida a todos. Tengo algunos anuncios que me gustaría hacer. La idea de justicia ambiental es algo muy importante para nosotros en la Oficina de Educación del Condado de Santa Cruz. Please note that we are going to be recording this event, and we ask for everybody to use the chat if you would like. Les pedimos a todos que puedan usar el chat para comunicarse con nosotros y también que estamos grabando este evento esta noche. I would like to share that the Spanish translation today, I'd like to welcome Jessica Serna Castañeda, who's providing Spanish translation, and it's available for anybody that would like to hear this presentation in Spanish using the interpretation globe icon in the bottom of your screen. Para todos los que quieran escuchar esta presentación en español, les pedimos por favor que utilicen el icono del globo que está en la parte inferior de la página para escuchar toda la presentación en español. Tenemos el orgullo de tener Jessica Serna Castañeda, que está haciendo la traducción al español, y ustedes van a poder escuchar todo lo que estamos discutiendo, hablando en español, al cambiar el idioma de inglés a español, Spanish. Entonces les pedimos que por favor pongan cambien el idioma si lo desean. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement to honor the land on which we are sitting, wherever we are, to show our respect and our appreciation to our ancestors who lived here for generations and generations. And this is a land acknowledgement I'd like to share. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswa-speaking Uipi tribe. The Amah Mutsun tribal band, comprised of the descendants of the indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. I think how appropriate it is and how necessary it is for us to acknowledge the land, acknowledge the people that lived here for thousands of years before us, as we talk about environmental justice as tonight in the conversation at Town Hall tonight. Now, beyond actually, I think I'm going to be introducing, oh no, not yet. So beyond the land acknowledgement, we'd like to share with you some information about creating an action plan highlighting the concrete steps an organization can take to support Indigenous communities. Similar to a land acknowledgement, a plan will include information and research on the land you occupy and will focus your plan on action. We recommend the following steps: conducting a self-assessment, do a resource assessment. What resources can you provide to support Indigenous people and nations? Do your research, outline a concrete plan, steps with specific measurable actions, go public with your plan, share it with your community, keep your plan handy and reflect on your progress. And of course, stay humble. We believe that beyond just making a land acknowledgement and showing our respect for the land and for the people that live here today and have lived here for thousands of years, there are steps that we can take to be able to participate in supporting our Indigenous communities in this area. And it starts with learning more about it, learning, embracing our community, and building a plan to be able to support our community. I'd like to share with you our agenda today. We have a welcome from me. We're going to be providing an environmental justice overview by Amity Sandage, who I'll introduce in a moment. We have a featured speaker, Chairman Valentin Lopez, who is a chairman of the Amah Mutsun tribal band. Featured speaker, Natalie Olivas, who's a community organizer at Regeneracíon. And of course, our student voices, which are a tradition of our town halls to always elevate and uplift the voices of our students as they inspire us and help lead us through our work in social justice in its many forms. And we'll also be breaking up into several groups to talking about, to discuss a variety of different topics. And then we'll return back here at the end of our session to share some wrap-ups and some thank yous. So I'm going to introduce at this point Amity Sandage, who's going to be talking to us about environmental justice. And before I do that, I want to, there's kind of when we think about the work that we do for equity and for justice, I think about how we have learned more, or we continue to learn year after year, and sometimes trauma after trauma, about how important this commitment to equity and social justice is, and again in its many forms. And when we think about the words we used to use, like we used to use words like tolerance and acceptance, and when I think about how much more we need to do to be able to reach this goal of justice, to ensure that regardless of who you are, where you came from, what you look like, what zip code you come from, that you have the same opportunities, the same outcomes to achieve what you need to achieve for your community. And I think about the application of this in environmental justice. I'm reminded of how much work that really needs to take place. We are in such a pivotal moment right now in history. And we have become so much more aware of so many of the injustices that have taken place and continue to take place locally and across this globe. It is so important for us to be able to reflect on our work, reflect on our practices, and really take a stand for environmental justice. And I have the pleasure of introducing Amity Sandage, who is a coordinator for environmental justice at the County Office of Education, and somebody who works tirelessly not only to work with teachers to bring in these ideas that we're going to be talking about tonight, to embed those in all our teaching, whether we're teaching science or language arts, but also working in support of students and bringing students together to be able to help them, to listen to them, to learn from them, and also support them in their efforts to bring action in their work towards environmental justice. And so it's really a pleasure to welcome Amity Sandage, who is joining us tonight. Welcome, Amity.
Thank you, Faris. I'm just really excited to be here tonight and have our community coming together to learn more about environmental justice. I'm actually the environmental literacy coordinator, and environmental justice is something I feel like I will be learning about forever alongside everyone else here. Learning about these issues is really an ongoing process as we deepen our understanding of the complexities of nature and human dependence on nature, and how we all interact around access to the natural resources that we need to learn and thrive and live. And the learning's never done. So in that spirit, I want to start off right now with a little bit of sharing of where we're all at, who are all of us here tonight, and begin by asking all of you to share what the term environmental justice means to you. So you can actually go ahead and find the chat icon in your Zoom controls and open the chat and just share a few words or phrases that come to mind when you hear that term, environmental justice, or if you have a longer idea or an idea for a definition, but definitely no need to look anything up. This may be a new idea for some people here. That's fine. It's fine if you don't have a clear idea, but let's see what people think about what that term means, environmental justice. And just go ahead and share in the chat. I already see climate justice coming up and equitable environments, respect and undoing harm. But it's intersectional. Representation for everyone around environmental issues and equal access. A lot about equitable access. And more about the climate crisis, relationships to nature, and sustainability. Thank you all for all this sharing. These are wonderful to see the themes coming through. So you go ahead and keep sharing and seeing the ideas that people have around this issue. And before we hear from our local speakers, I'm going to go ahead and ground us with some larger context and data and ideas to think about what environmental justice means. And first, I'm going to share 3 different organizations' messages about environmental justice. And that way we can think about how these messages are similar and different from each other. Again, there's no one right answer. These are all part of the story of environmental justice. So what you see here is the official definition of environmental justice used by the US Environmental Protection Agency. I'm just going to read it. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And this goal will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. So that's one definition used by government and regulatory agencies. The next slide has another, not a definition, but a viewpoint that comes from a nonpartisan policy institute, the Center for American Progress. And they state that clean drinking water, clean air, public parks and beaches, biodiversity, and open spaces are shared goods to which every person in the United States has an equal right, both in principle and in law. Nature is supposed to be a great equalizer whose services are free, universal, and accessible to all humans without discrimination. In reality, however, American society distributes nature's benefits and the effects of its destruction and decline unequally by race, income, and age. So that view of environmental justice obviously has a very strong focus on social justice and ties back to a lot of the access issues I was seeing you all stating in the chat. And we will be looking at a bunch of data related to access a little bit later in this intro. So the next slide is the third view of environmental justice, which is a mapping tool from the California Office of Environmental Health. This tool is called CalEnviroScreen, and it's available for anyone to use, students, teachers, community members. You can just go online and use it. You don't need an account, it's just a website, and it uses visual representation of data to show what communities are most impacted by environmental health threats. It determines impact by combining data on pollution with data on the characteristics of the population of people in that region. And so we're looking at a map of our county. You can see the bay and a little bit of the town's names. And you can see that our Pajaro Valley region is most impacted. The orange is The darkest orange is the very most highly impacted in the state. They're very close to being one of the most highly impacted communities across the state of California. And as I said, this map layers data on pollution and populations to identify who's most impacted. But the next two slides show a little breakdown of how that data layering happens that I think is important to look at. So this first slide is about the pollution data. And I wanted to show this because that first map combines all the impacts and can be misinterpreted to mean that there's no pollution burden in that big green area of our county. But in fact, it varies by type of pollution. So for example, if you look on the upper right map, that is showing drinking water impacts. And you can see that parts of San Lorenzo Valley have drinking water impacts as severe as the areas south of Watsonville. Both are in the most severe category. But in the lower right map, you see that same San Lorenzo Valley area is actually the least affected by pesticides in our whole county, shown there. So when you combine all the data, sometimes you don't see the individual aspects quite as much. All of us are being affected by environmental health issues at different levels. And the next slide shows the population characteristics. Those populations have different capacities for being able to mitigate those pollution impacts. And so this shows sensitive populations that would have a harder time dealing with those impacts. Populations like, or characteristics like poverty or low education attainment or linguistic isolation. So this shows our county with all of the combined factors in that black box, which shows the communities that have the most sensitive populations. So I just wanted to make that clear. That data and the other one then are combined to put together that first map, if you go to the next slide, that shows our overall most vulnerable and most impacted communities in our county. So Cal EnviroScreen helps display the inequities in environmental health and human health across communities. But another important aspect of environmental justice, that's okay, I was ready for that one, is the nature gap. So both who has access or who does not have access to nature spaces, and also who feels welcome and included in nature spaces. So one thing we know is that all children are getting much less time in nature compared to previous generations. Current research, and this is really shocking if you haven't heard it, current research shows that on average, children spend only 4 to 7 minutes a day in unstructured outdoor play. That's a very, very big departure from a generation or 2 generations ago. And meanwhile, they're spending hours on screens, 6.5 hours on average. 4 to 7 minutes versus 6.5 hours. These shifts are driven by a lot of factors, changes in technology and attitudes of parents about safety and all kinds of things. But in the mix of all of those drivers, it's really important that we remember and recognize that this is not simply driven by choice. Many families lack access to safe, public, welcoming green spaces. And access has been decreasing across the US over time. And not only that, it's not equal across communities. So next we're going to look at some data for us to think about that. So this shows a study about access where people live. So people of color are more likely than white people to live in an area that is nature deprived. Nature deprived meaning their census tract they live in has a higher proportion of natural area that was lost to human activities that is less than the state level median. So you can see here that almost 3/4 of people of color are likely to live in nature deprived areas. And this is the opposite ratio from white communities. Next slide looks only at income in the first 3 bars. So instead of looking at ethnicity, if we look at high, moderate, and low income in the first 3 bars, you see that low income is also associated with nature-deprived areas. Up to 75% of low income people live in nature-deprived areas when you combine it with the factoring in non-white communities, 75%. And the last slide was a surprise when I found this data. Compared to the overall population, families with children have the least access to nature. 65% of families with children live in nature-deprived areas, compared with only 36% of families without children. And this lack of access is much, much higher for families of color with children. So clearly we have some access issues across the US. I thought you would probably also want to see on the next slide a little more local data. Just wondering, because like, oh, Santa Cruz, we have so many parks, it's so green. This is a map showing parks and open space, public park access across our county. So you can see the green is more heavily weighted to the north compared to Watsonville. And this is from the California State Parks Community Fact Finder. So you can also interact with that map online and look and add in the disadvantaged communities to see it flip-flops. You see the Watsonville area again. So next slide. So environmental justice says access for everyone. And access brings amazing benefits. For example, reducing children's stress by 28%, as you see here in one of the data points, and increasing the ability of children to concentrate, motivating their learning. And so we want these benefits for all. That's why the access is so important. And the National Environmental Education Foundation, NEEF, which is linked there in the slides, provides a lot more information on the benefits of nature. And there's also a wonderful website, all in Spanish, linked below, and they'll shared in the chat. So I've also got a little snapshot on the next slide, just pulling out the range of benefits. It's such a nice long list that time in nature brings. I just had to include that last one because it was such a happy infographic after that data, which is a little crushing. So, but there's so much more than what was on the infographic in terms of what benefits time in nature brings, from academic performance increases to motivation and social skills and reduced aggression and wonderful physical health benefits, and lots of psychological benefits. So again, you can find a lot more information in those links. And I just want to close my portion with a little bit of information about this idea of environmental identity. So there's research that shows that people who develop a sense of themselves as being part of nature are more likely to take action to care for the environment. That seems really obvious when I say it like that. But what seems to be forgotten is that that development of an environmental identity actually needs to be supported. You can't build that sense of being a part of nature if you're not spending time in nature. So we have to provide first experiences that make people feel safe in nature, especially with all these natural disasters. Some kids are starting to think of nature as an unsafe place. We need to make sure we're creating safe time in nature for people to build that trust in nature. That's phase one. And then research shows people can move into this independent exploration phase where they build their own sense of confidence and use their own senses to explore and learn about the environment. And that prepares them for environmental competence, where they really can learn all of the complexities of how humans affect the environment and how the environment affects us. and all that wonderful information they can learn in school can really be supported best if they have those first two phases to support them. And then they're really ready for environmental action, where they have the internal motivation because they feel a sense of connection, and they have the know-how, the knowledge about the complexities to choose wisely and to effectively act. So that's this path to environmental identity that schools can really be a part of. And I just want to acknowledge and celebrate that we have districts and schools in our county doing wonderful work in these different areas. Schools with outdoor learning spaces, with inspiring garden programs and green teams, getting students involved in environmental action, but it's all in pockets, and this needs to be everywhere. And again, we need access to be there for everyone. So I think we all recognize there's a lot of work to do, and our districts want to see environmental justice too. So that's why I'm so excited to have you all here today, and I want you to all share your ideas with us about what we can do. We'll share that with districts, and I'm so excited to hear and for us to all learn together too from our guest speakers who have valuable perspectives to share with us. So I'm going to pass it back to Faris to introduce Chairman Lopez.
Thank you so much, Amity, and thank you for reminding us how important the classrooms are for creating an opportunity for students to become those who are taking action in protecting our environment. And Amity works with folks with students and teachers from all over the county of Santa Cruz, and has helped to create these opportunities for students in a variety of ways. So we're really grateful to the information you shared tonight and to all your work, Amity. Thank you. Now it is really my pleasure to introduce one of our featured speakers, Chairman Valentin Lopez, who has served as a chair of the Amah Mutsun tribal band since 2003 and the president of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust since its inception. Chairman Lopez is a Native American advisor to the University of California, Office of the President, on issues related to repatriation. He's also a Native American advisor to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, and the Phoebe Hearst Museum of Anthropology. Chairman Lopez is actively involved in efforts to restore tribal indigenous knowledge and ensure our history is accurately told. Welcome, Chairman Lopez.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Saba. And I want to thank the Santa Clara County Office of Education for inviting me to speak this evening on the issue of equity, which is incredibly important to our tribe. Before I get started, when I was elected chair in 2003, the elders said, Val, whenever you talk, always tell our history and always tell the truth. And so I feel obligated to always give just a small bit of history. And so here goes. Our history begins, and this isn't in the PowerPoint. I freelance when I talk. At Mount Amah, which was the tallest peak in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And there's two important things that came from our creation story that we pay attention to a lot today. One is the Creator clearly defined our territory, and we must stay within our territory and help other tribes, neighboring tribes, in any way we can. Secondly, is that Creator gave us a responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And our people did that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Our people were not hunters and gatherers. Our people were very sophisticated land stewards, land managers. I'm sorry to tell the story of when I was in college, university. I took sociology, anthropology, archaeology, and I knew what those classes meant. There was a lot of clues into that, just that name. But science, what the heck did science mean? So I looked it up, and study was the science of knowledge. And so with that, I want to say that our science our ancestors, every generation of them, every one of them was a scientist. And if you put that 15, 20,000 years of learning together, that's what our tribe had at the time of the first contact with the colonizers. I'll go to the PowerPoint here. The Amah Mutsun, we descend from the Mutsun speaking people that were taken to Mission Santa Cruz and Mission San Juan Bautista. It was our practice to steward and take care of the lands and to ensure that there was resources for the bear, the elk, the deer, the mice, the rabbits, etc. Today, we have over 600 BIA registered members and about 200 waiting to be registered. We are recognized as a continuous and historic tribe. We are recognized by the city of Santa Cruz having that distinction, and also by the city of San Juan Bautista and by the Catholic Diocese of Monterey, who recognizes as the legitimate, historic, and continuous tribe of this area. We experienced 3 successive waves of brutal colonization. The mission period and the Spanish period, the Mexican period, and the American California period. All 3 periods, they wanted to destroy. They wanted to destroy our, they wanted to destroy our culture, destroy our environments, and destroy our indigenous knowledge, our spirituality. Next slide, please. The California coast was one of the most biodiverse landscapes in North America. It was a coastal prairie, and we would have a regular cycle where we would burn, and we would divide the lands into segments and burn one segment at a time. And each year we would burn a different segment, and that ensured that the coastal prairie stayed open from all the shrubbery and the trees. And it also provided a great abundance of the plant resources that were there. And indigenous people cared for the environment this way for thousands of years. Next slide, please. What does environmental justice mean to the Amah Mutsun? It means restoring ceremony back to the land, restoring the sacredness back to the land. All restoration must begin with restoring sacredness. And it also means gathering on traditional lands, gathering resources, gathering for prayer, gathering for ceremony, gathering for many different reasons. Next slide, please. Whenever the first settlers, and those are the early explorers, when they came on those ships and they looked at the coast of California, they said that it was just a beautiful mosaic of a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different plants. And it was a peaceful park-like setting. And that's how they described the coast of the central coast of California. And they thought that that mosaic was just something that happened random or coincidentally, or that's just the way God intended it to be. They did not realize that our ancestors had stewarded the lands that way for thousands and thousands of years. It didn't talk about how our people worked hard. And now in 2005, a book came out. It was called Tending the Wild by M. Cat Anderson. We know Cat very well. She was on our board of directors for a period of time. And she talked to a lot of different tribes about tending the land and how they stewarded the lands. And we started talking about it in our tribe that, that our people took care of Mother Earth and all living things. That's our obligation. And then in 2006, the tribal elders came to a tribal council meeting and said that our creation story says we must find a way to return to, to take care of Mother Earth. We need to find a way to do that. Next slide, please. So there we started working on restoring the indigenous knowledge that was lost as a result of that history, where they said they wanted to destroy our history and destroy our culture. We had lost a lot of it, but we had to restore it, and it was within us. It was within our blood, within our DNA. And then we also, so we started doing that. And then in 2013, we developed the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. And then our land trust obtained nonprofit status. And so I'm the president of the board of directors. And our tribe and our board of directors is directed by Mutsun members. The majority of our board are tribal members, and that's important so that it will always be the tribe that makes decisions for our land trust. We are small, but we are growing rapidly. Today we have 4 full-time staff, but we are recruiting for additional staff now. And then we have part-time, plus we have research associates and a lot of volunteers. So you can see that our land trust is growing. Let's go to the next slide, please. We have 4 goals of our land trust. Is to conserve and protect our cultural and sacred sites and the natural resources and our cultural resources of the Mutsun and Waswas people. We are working to restore that indigenous knowledge so we can, once again, steward the lands as our ancestors did. Today, we have a Native American Stewardship Corps comprised of our tribal members who work on the land. They work 3 weeks on and 1 week off. That 1 week off, they return to their homes, normally in Madera, Fresno, Hanford, and other places. So they could reunite with their families and stuff like that and wash their clothes and get ready to come back. But we have 4 days of work and one day where we do cultural learning. This past week, we learned how, we were teaching them, the stewards, about how to take care of white root sedge, which is an important basketry material, as an example. And we're working in Watsonville on restoring a large stand of white root sedge so that it can become usable for basketry in 3-4 years. And the next goal of our land trust is research and education. We want to research to restore the knowledge. A lot of that research is working with archaeologists on the lands, but we take extreme precautions so that we don't interrupt the ancestors. We do things such as underground, such as underground penetrating radar and other techniques to see what's under there. And if we see any images that look like they could be human, we do not disrupt them. And we also do education. We educate our tribal members and we educate the public on traditional Native American stewardship, hoping that they can take care of, learn to take care of the lands just as our ancestors did. I remember I was speaking in a 4th grade class, and it was, I believe, within your school district. And at the end, we had of my talk to 4th graders about the mission period. And I'm very careful that I don't traumatize them with that brutal history. At the end, I asked, we asked for questions, and this one 4th grader, she raised her hand and she said, "What can we do to help?" And that question had never been asked of me before. A 4th grader, what can we do to help? I couldn't ask her to write a check to our land trust. That would not have worked. And I had to think quick on my feet. And then I asked her, "Do you like butterflies?" And she says, yes. And I said, go to the library and read about what plants do butterflies like. And when you find out what plants do the butterflies like, plant them in your backyard or maybe even your front yard and plant a lot of them. And then the butterflies will come to your house and they'll have good food to eat and they'll make them very happy and their population will grow. And then I said, and then I told the other children, I go, you like bees? Do you like hummingbirds? What do you like? I said, I said, find out what plants they like and plant those. And she was very happy and the other children got all excited about that. So it's little things that they can do. They don't have to go out and work on huge landscapes. Just take learning and at that early level, just to take care of the important species in our world. Yes, thank you. We work hard to conserve and protect our cultural and our sacred sites. You see the second paragraph there, or the second note, it says we currently hold 2 conservation easements. Well, as of, I believe it was yesterday, we held 3 conservation easements. Some of you may have seen that it was announced in today's Santa Cruz Sentinel that we are now hold a conservation easement on 540 acres in San Juan Bautista. And that's the first time that our tribe has access to land in San Benito County in over 200 years. Since we were removed from the missions, we now have access to 540 acres. We're also, that sign there, protect Uristock. Uristock is at the very south end of Gilroy. It's where the 101 and the 129 meet in the northwest corner. Those mountains there are at the very end or bottom of the Santa Cruz Mountains. When you cross the street there, you're entering the Gabalan Range. But here, this was the most sacred site of our people. We conducted ceremonies there, and people would come as far away as Yosemite, and people from the Chumash and the Pomo tribe would come to our ceremonies at Uristock. Uristock translates in Spanish, I believe, to the place of the big head. Perhaps that would be Mutsun. I see that grammatical locative talk there. To the place of the big head. And that is where our big head ceremonies were held. And they were our most important. And our spiritual leader, Kuksui, lived at Uristock. And we had 4 villages at Uristock. And their responsibility was that they have, that they keep those lands sacred and ready for, and prepared for ceremony. And there was 4 villages there. To our tribe, 4 is a very important number because there's 4 seasons, there's 4 directions. You have mind, body, soul, spirit, etc. 4 is a very important number to us. And we have 4 village sites there at Uristock. And 4 gives balance. 4 is very important for balance. And so the 4 village sites there help maintain balance at Uristock. Today there's an effort, a proposal to allow sand and gravel mining of 4 of our most sacred mountains. Native American spirituality, especially for an unrecognized tribe, is not recognized as a legitimate spiritual religious location or spot. I mean, if this right here was a Catholic, a Muslim, any other religion that you can think of, if that site was there, they would not dare think of destroying it by approving a sand and gravel mining. But they are talking about, there's a lot of pressure on the county to approve that sand and gravel mining. And we were told the only thing that would stop it would be overwhelming public support. And so we are asking that, we do ask the people to please get involved with our Protect Juristock campaign. What can you do to support Indigenous people as they work? Well, before I say that, let me say, I talk a lot. Thank you very much, Berenice, for putting up those sites. It's what I talk a lot about the brutal histories and stuff like that. It's important that people today understand that we know that they were not the perpetrators who were paying the bounty money, who were collecting the bounty money, etc. They were not, you yourselves sitting at this meeting today, you are not the perpetrators. But we ask you to consider, how much have you benefited? How much have you benefited from the destruction that happened to our to Native people? The house is built on stolen land. All the schools are on stolen land. All the churches are on stolen land, grocery stores. Every day you put your feet on the floor, you're putting your feet on land that was stolen. So what we ask is that people today recognize how much they benefit, and then to help tribes, recover from that brutal history, help them deal with their historic trauma, help them restore their Indigenous knowledge, their culture, their spirituality, help them find, once again, regain balance in their lives, and to develop their identities and their self-esteem so they can go forward. That's the best thing you can do to help support Indigenous peoples. There's some ideas there, and all those thoughts and ideas work. But it's not just the Amah Mutsun that need help, it's all tribes in California and the United States. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak tonight. I truly appreciate it.
Chairman Lopez, thank you so much for your powerful words tonight. I have to say, I don't think I've ever heard you speak, and I am so moved by especially your reminder about our responsibility to recognize on where we stand every day, and where our homes and our schools and where we live our lives every day, and our responsibility to the land and to the people that lived here. Thank you so much. On behalf of everybody at the County Office of Education here in Santa Cruz and in the community, I just want to tell you how appreciative we are to your leadership and to everything that you've done in support of our community and to the Amah Mutsun peoples and specifically. I was struck by one thing that I as you were speaking, your discussion about restoration and your discussion about kind of the celebration of culture and nature seemed interchangeable, and that was so powerful that you created a complete connection between those two, and I think that really opens my eyes to understanding the important connection between nature and our Indigenous communities. So thank you so much for your powerful words tonight.
You're absolutely
next,
right, and thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Lopez. Next, I get the pleasure of introducing a wonderful speaker who comes to us from a organization here in Watsonville, who many of you are probably very familiar with, coming from Regeneracíon, a community organization in the Watsonville area that really was recently established in Watsonville and has really brought so much information and change to and awareness to our community. And I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Natalie Olivas, who is a community organizer with Regeneracíon. She works to help build community capacity to advocate for equitable climate action. Her childhood exposed her to the extreme outcomes of environmental degradation, which drove her to pursue a career in environmental justice. She works across sectors to interweave climate justice into various programs and curriculums. Natalie has experience working with local governments, businesses, and nonprofits in analyzing policy, meeting sustainability goals, and education and outreach. Please welcome Natalie Olivas.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you, Faris and Amity and everyone at COE for putting this on. I'm really honored to be in this space. And thank you, Chairman Lopez. I was so moved by your talk. Okay. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So yes, I am Natalie. I'm the community organizer with Regeneracíon. And I wanted to share a little bit about my background as well. I grew up in the Central Valley, where we consistently ranked highest for the most polluted air in the nation because of emissions caused by oil and gas extraction and industrial agriculture. Growing up, my siblings and I all had respiratory issues, and I never quite made the connection between like environmental degradation and what I was experiencing in my daily life until I got older. And so when I got to college and realized that, you know, this is not the way that like we should be living our lives, that's what really drove me to pursue this career in environmental justice. And so a little bit about our organization at Regeneracíon. Our mission is to help the community of the Pajaro Valley adapt and flourish as the climate changes so that everyone can thrive and live in harmony with the natural world. And I know that's a very broad mission, but I think it was written that way on purpose. And our work is distinct in that we approach climate action in an intersectional way, meaning acknowledging the various social injustices that are intertwined with driving the climate crisis. And Amity did a really good job kind of highlighting those injustices at the beginning, and I'll just touch on a little bit more. But as you all know, Watsonville is a primarily low-income agricultural community, and many of our population are farm workers, and farm workers are experiencing disproportionate effects of climate impacts. You know, they're forced to work outside in these extreme heat, which can cause heat-related illnesses, and there's also the disproportionate effects of being a day laborer, especially in agriculture, working under hoop houses. They can experience 10 to 15 degree higher heat under those plastic berry hoop houses. So for example, like today it was 74 degrees. Being underneath one of those houses, they would be experiencing closer to 90 degrees of extreme heat. And there's also the compounding effects of, you know, why are they out there? Why do they have to work these long hours and overexert themselves? And it's really these social and economic issues that are compounding with the climate crisis. So a little bit more about that is they also experience exposure to pesticides, being paid by the piece, and they have little to no protections for people who are undocumented. And, you know, there can be threats of lower pay and no overtime pay and just little workers' rights. And so a lot of these issues that farm workers are facing compounding with the climate crisis is why Regeneracíon kind of emerged. Our founders kind of saw that need. So we emerged to address climate change as a social justice issue and to really think with the community about our local impacts and to think about how we can engage with each other to build resilience. And so our goal is to inform the community about the reality of the climate emergency. So, you know, we can see it happening around us, but we're not always making those connections. For example, I said it was all around me growing up, but I wasn't always making the connections. And we really want to inform everyone about the actions that they can take to reduce their own emissions, as well as participate in a just transition off of fossil fuels. So we do this through a variety of handouts in both English and Spanish, and we partner a lot with community partners to distribute these handouts. We have one that informs farm workers on how to best protect themselves from the consequences of extreme heat, while also making that connection to how these extreme heat events are being driven by the changing climate. And so another key part of our work is creating pathways to leadership for young people. So we host monthly meetings, and we work a lot with students to think about how this is really our planet that we're inheriting, and we really have to be like the stewards and leaders that are going to bring us into a better future. And I know that can be exhausting, so we really want to host like a welcoming environment for us to, you know, avoid burnout and things like that. And one of my key roles as an organizer is leading our advocacy committee, which is made up of volunteers. And our projects are really led about what the community wants, what the volunteers want, what are the most relevant issues. So we've focused a lot on city council, local and state policy, and influencing city budget, and thinking about how local ordinances are tied into climate. So things like housing projects and police budgets, like things that people may not see at face value being related to climate, but really are impacting the way that we're living our day-to-day lives. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen there. And I'm gonna share a little bit more of a sentimental aspect of what I think it is to be an organizer. And I think it's really maintaining hope and optimism in our community. Because I know when I read climate news, it's mainly doom and gloom. And like Amity mentioned earlier, some people are starting to think of like nature as like this horrible force that is only bringing bad things. So I think it's really important to really maintain that sense of optimism and hope, because I think that doom can only like motivate us for so long before we think, what's the point? Yeah, so next I'm gonna go into a little bit of a framing on climate action versus climate justice, and kind of the differences between climate action alone and the justice aspect. So I think that historically, climate action has been presented as this kind of like cold narrative of saving the polar bears from the melting polar ice caps. You know, we have global warming, the world is warming, and the plants and animals are dying. And I think that narrative is finally starting to shift. And we are finally beginning to see it as the existential threat to human life that it is. And I will say that similarly, environmental action has also had a narrative that has kind of been disconnected from the mainstream population, and has been led by wealthy white populations. For example, Love Canal was a textbook case that is said to have sparked the mainstream environmental movement. And it was when a white community began to see the effects of pollution in their neighborhoods. And so these environmental issues were framed and targeted to only certain groups of people. But I think we're starting to realize that environmentalism and environmental action isn't just for white, well-off communities. And as was discussed earlier, Black and Brown communities have historically been environmentally overburdened by these negative effects. Black and Brown communities now and historically have breathed in disproportionate amounts of pollution than they are responsible for. So in order to properly address climate justice, we have to acknowledge the unjust systems that have led us here. So how have so many communities, particularly communities of color, experienced and are continuing to experience these unjust realities? And I would say that the answer is racism and classism and centuries of oppression and exploitation. And I think we're also starting to realize that Black and Brown and Asian and Indigenous communities have long been the keepers of this traditional knowledge, this knowledge of caring for the earth, and also this knowledge of resistance to these exploitative systems. And while polar bears and saving the whales are very important indicators, they are only sections of this interconnectedness of our delicate life on this planet. So when we zoom out from these specific environmental problems, we can begin to see that both humans and animals and wild spaces and the built environment are all part of this planetary existence, and they're all part of climate justice. So when we talk about climate justice, we're thinking about how the people who are being most affected by these negative impacts of climate change have the least amount of resources to cope with these disasters, like wildfires, floods, and extreme heat. And we see a lot of examples of this in Santa Cruz County. There's no lack of environmental or climate action in the northern part of the county. There's so many organizations that are addressing, ocean acidification and, tree planting, but there is a lack of justice. And so I wanted to give an example of climate action that is not rooted in justice and why justice is so important when we're thinking about climate action. So one that is really popular right now is transportation. And when we're thinking about transportation systems, if we continue business as usual and we push everyone to buy a brand new electric vehicle built by companies who continue to perpetuate this myth of endless growth on our finite planet, this is a false solution. This can look like billionaires funding the destabilization of countries in Latin America for lithium. And even though switching from gas-powered vehicles to electric vehicles can and will significantly draw down emissions, it could also lead to the continued destruction of precious ecosystems and traditional knowledge. So that's why we can't just look at climate action without thinking about the equity aspect and how are other populations being affected outside of our own. So climate justice looks like land back to Indigenous communities. It looks like the people living on the land having sovereignty over their resources, their food, their water, their homes. It means the end of racist and exploitative systems that only serve to benefit a small percentage of people. And in Santa Cruz County, it means that the people who have done the least to cause this crisis can be at the center of solutions. But in order for us to do so, we need to have our basic needs met, and solutions that are inaccessible to the poor, solutions that do not address or respect the complexities of our characters are also false solutions. They're red herrings to keep us on this path of oppression and exploitation of both people and planet. And so what I've learned from working at Regeneracíon and in this community is that there's no silver bullet when it comes to climate action. We have to continuously take a place-based approach and plan with our community on what they want healthy and sustainable communities to look like. We have to involve people on the ground as well as local and state legislators, because individual action or policy alone will not work. We have to combine efforts and get every sector and person involved. Recently, we completed a mobility assessment survey to ask Watsonville residents their preference for new alternative modes of low emission transportation. And what we found is that a large portion of our population were not aware of common forms of alternative transportations like car shares and bike shares that are commonplace in places like Santa Cruz and San Jose. And what I heard from residents is that they're open to these new forms of transportation, but they're facing too many compound barriers that are getting in the way. They're working underpaid jobs and facing food and housing insecurity. And they do not have the time or resources or information to consider these alternatives. So what we're actually seeing is that people's basic needs must be met in order for us to fully engage in these conversations, in order for us to have a real seat at the table. And right now, a large portion of our community are not having their basic needs met. And so the strategies that are effective are looking at people's entire lives and how these compounding oppressive systems are barricading the way to meaningful engagement in equitable climate action. And that when we are facing these difficult problems, we are doing ourselves a disservice if we aren't considering and respecting the paths that have brought us all here. We have the solutions to the climate crisis within all of us, but we have to first end these systems of oppression, both systemically and within ourselves. We have to heal and organize and hold our hope and optimism closely. Equity and climate justice is not a checklist of actions. It is a deep commitment to the process of unlearning centuries of racist colonial beliefs and working to dismantle them. And it's collaboration, and it's uplifting and restoring our relationships with each other and with our planet. And this is our home, and it's all that we can save. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Wow, thank you so much, Natalie. That was absolutely powerful. Thank you. Thank you for your powerful words. I'm so glad we're recording this because I'm going to go back and watch this on our website. There was so much rich content and wisdom in your words, and it's going to take me some time to unpack. And so, thank you so much for the work that you're doing with Regeneracíon in Watsonville, for reminding us kind of the intersectionality and how it applies to environmental justice and our responsibilities to think about everything that we do as responsible stewards of nature and of our community. I'd also like to give a shout out to Nancy Folstich, who is the director, who is somebody I've known for a long time. She has dedicated her life to serving our community. She established Regeneracíon in 2016 and working with amazing leaders like Natalie and doing this work every single day. And so I see that Nancy is here in our forum, and I just want to thank you so much, Nancy, for everything that you're doing. Natalie, thank you so much for your powerful words, for being a part of this forum, and for helping us lead to responsible and positive, hopeful actions. It was inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now I have the pleasure of introducing somebody that works for the County Office of Education, who's going to be introducing some students. Welcome, Celeste Gutierrez, who is our Student Leadership and Engagement Coordinator at the County Office of Education. Celeste is dedicated to serving, connecting, engaging students, and works with a variety of different groups of students who focus on different areas. And she's going to be introducing some amazing student speakers who are going to be joining us in just a moment. Celeste, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Faris. Good evening, everyone. Our youth and all the generations that come after them are the ones who are going to have to live with the decisions that we make today. And that's why we think it is so important to amplify their voices as well as have them at the table. And that's why I'm so honored and privileged to have current and former Youth for Environmental Action students share with all of you tonight. We're going to have Marlise, Velasco, Azucena, Carolyn, Lena, and Tamara. Thank you. Marlise.
Hello. Well, thank you, Celeste, for inviting me for this opportunity. I was part of Youth for Environmental Action last year, and I'm very well connected with the Santa Cruz County Office of Education. So I'm now going to be the student panel facilitator. So we have our students here. So if you guys can please introduce yourselves, your name, pronouns, and the school that you attend.
I can go first. I'm Lena Jones. I attend Pacific Collegiate School. I am a senior and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tamara and I'm a sophomore at Santa Cruz High. And I'm also part of YEA as well as Youth for Climate Justice and the Coalition for Environmental Justice at Santa Cruz High. And I'm super excited to be here today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Azucena. I'm currently a Cabrillo College student. I was a Watsonville High student, and I was also part of Yale last year.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn. I'm very grateful to be here. I go to Pacific Collegiate School, and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. So first question, what sparked you to come on here? Like what motivated you to be like, I want to be on here and I want my voice to be heard? So we can go any direction.
Well, I can go first. Again, I've moved around a lot in my life. I've lived in Long Beach and Oakland and Philly, and now live in Salinas. I've lived in a lot of places that feel the direct effects of climate injustice, especially just like socioeconomically. I've seen that firsthand, and like I've had respiratory problems as a result of that, like Natalie kind of mentioned that she's experienced. And so it's something I'm really passionate about, and this is what I want to go into in my future. And being someone that like does live right next to farmland, and I see, and like my neighbors, you know, work in the fields and stuff, like I talk with them, and I don't know, has a really like big connection to me personally. So it's just something I'm passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I definitely like grew up hearing about climate change and that it was something, but I don't think I realized like how drastic an issue it was and how little time we had left to stop it until maybe like at the beginning of middle school. And so that was when I first started taking action for climate justice. And so I'm just super excited to share about what I've been working on and what needs to be worked on in Santa Cruz.
For myself, I first got introduced to it in elementary, but it was mostly about protecting the oceans. However, as I grew up, I started to realize how within my community, which is Watsonville, Pajaro Valley, and Royal Oaks, were being affected on a greater degree. And that is an issue that I wish to tackle on in the future.
Yeah, I was interested in getting into working on climate justice and participating in this panel because I was privileged to be able to be in the environment and exist in nature a lot when I was younger. And I think that's a human right. So I really want to ensure that future generations and current generations are able to have those experiences. And I think we need to have environmental justice in order for that to happen. So having these conversations and simulating community is really important.
Very personal experiences on why you guys are motivated to take action. Moving on to our second question. What is the most important and impactful thing that school districts are not doing but should be doing, and how they can implement environmental activism within your school?
So right now, I think school districts are making a lot of really great changes to work towards environmental justice. However, they don't have an actual goal for getting to zero emissions. And without having that goal of where we need to be, we can't figure out what needs to happen to get there. So Youth for Climate Justice has been working with Chris Monroe on trying to get like an inventory of what our emissions look like right now and what we need to do to get them to zero. But I think that that is the first step that needs to happen in Santa Cruz and in all the school districts if we're going to, ever reduce our emissions.
I think also just making environmental education accessible to everyone is really important because I know, at least at my school, like Carolyn and I, our school is not like the most diverse, but I live in Salinas and there are a lot of kids from Watsonville that commute up there. And I think the amount of environmental education across the board should be increased because I honestly had not learned pretty much anything about environmental science besides just what I've learned outside and having parents that work in the environment. until I took AP Environmental Science. So I think like embedding that into the curriculum so that everyone is able to learn about that. And like Amity was mentioning, just have access to the environment. That's like a big one for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Lena, because it can be really disheartening to be experiencing eco-anxiety as a student or experience these natural disasters that are occurring locally or globally, and then show up to school and not really feel like that's being addressed or that's being talked about. So I think what we want to do in schools is really avoid like desensitizing our students to these events that are occurring. So really opening it up, having these conversations, addressing what's going on in our world and preparing our students for the future. And then taking it sort of away from the classroom level and more to the administrative level. I think it's important that they really engage with their students in like a meaningful way and allow them to be civically engaged, because there are stakeholders who care about the environment and want to see certain things happen. It just that they're not being communicated with currently, and they don't feel that their voices are heard.
I liked how you guys touched on privilege, about how one is educated and how one is able to know about certain situations. For me, the reason why I even got into student activism was because I took AP Environmental Science, and that was what opened everything up, and that's why I'm here. So it's nice that we all see that connected. On to the next question. How do you find out about current environmental issues going around in your community and in your school? I know because of the pandemic, it's been hard to like know what is going on, how to like be updated. So I want to hear from you guys. How are you guys able to know what's going on around your communities and school districts?
Usually, at least for my school, I usually found the information through a science teacher, and not all science teachers are implementing, education on this topic. But unless you have a connection directly to that teacher or maybe to ASB, there's not really a way to find out more about resources within the school or within the community.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it seems very isolated currently, and it's not really ingrained into the structure of the school, especially at like the administrative level. But I do want to say that there definitely are teachers there that are passionate about environmental work. It would just be nice to see the administration really backing them up, and that being more of a structural component in the schools.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Azucena and Carolyn both said. And how I got involved in environmental justice is I actually helped organize for like March for Our Lives gun violence walkout a long time ago, and someone heard that I organized for that. And so when like the Fridays for Future people started organizing demonstrations about climate change, like a family friend reached out to me and asked if I would help organize. And so I think definitely a lot of the time people just get involved by knowing someone else who already is involved. And I know at Santa Cruz High there is like the Climate Justice Club, and at some other schools as well. But those are usually run by students who care a lot, and they're not usually fueled by like the administration.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I forgot to add my personal experience about how I got involved, which is through Youth for Environmental Action, which is run through the County Office of Education. And like Tamara said, that does really take some really dedicated and passionate people like our mentors, Amity and Celeste, along with a very passionate group of students who are really dedicated to the work. But sometimes it can be hard to find those groups for students.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, this I thought about, like, how challenging is it to find a teacher like trust? And it's like we're both very passionate about this. Now, what can be the next step that we can take action towards, just like a small little action step within our school? Because I know it can be hard sometimes. Where I went to school, there's only one science teacher who taught all the science classes, and she could only do so much. So I just want to see how your experiences with that.
Honestly, till this year, very hard. This year, my AP Environmental Science actually worked at UCSC and did a bunch of research from the coast of Baja California to Alaska on the effects climate change is having on different ecosystems and stuff. And so he like really fuels all of my passions and research I want to do. So like right now I'm taking water samples from my county, Salinas, and then also part of Watsonville, near agricultural areas, just to see the discrepancies in like nitrate and phosphate levels in the water, and to see like how that compares to the Santa Cruz samples that we analyzed in class. And so like he really is the first teacher though that I feel like is encouraging me to further my environmental like research, but also just in class, like he'll sometimes be, ask us if we know how to answer other kids' questions. But yeah, honestly, until him, it like was really hard. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I've worked with some really amazing teachers who care a lot about climate justice. And I think that sometimes too, they aren't able to do all that they would like to do because they have to follow the rules as a teacher. And I think the systems that are set up in place for them and what they are able to do not prioritize climate justice.
Okay, I can move on to the next question. What are schools doing right now? Like, what do you feel like, okay, they got this right? Yeah, they're like needing some help over here in this areas, but what is something they're doing right now?
For Watsonville High specifically, I have seen that some of the clubs and the ASB have started, doing more cleanups, that be during summer or during breaks when people have, or students, have more time. But other than that, I feel that the progress overall has been very slow.
Yeah, I agree that it seems like very minimal steps. Like I have seen, there are recycling bins at our school, but sometimes they're not divided between the trash and the recycling, and they all get put into the same trash bag. And we do have like some information like posted on the walls about climate change here and there, or about plastic reduction. And then I think we just have the one class about environmental science, and then a little bit sprinkled across the other classes, but it really depends on the teacher's motivation. So again, it's not really put in place. And then stuff like occasionally there will be compostable like lunchware, but it seems to be just based off if there's one person who's really involved in planning, who's really passionate in the environment, and that can get changed in a second if they leave or move on from that job.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I also think that schools have gotten a fair amount better in supporting students and young leaders who are working towards climate justice. But I think that schools and administration should be the people who are pushing and motivating students to take climate justice, and that it shouldn't have to be coming from the students.
Yeah, and I will say like there definitely is acknowledgement, and like I don't want this to be like pooping on all of our schools, because definitely I think compared to other states, we are very lucky to be in a place that actually will recognize that climate change exists and is real and is happening all around us. But at the same time, like Carolyn was saying, like I see kids throw trash into one bin, even though there's a recycling and a trash side. And so it really, and her and I definitely can attest to this, that it takes a lot just to try and get to the administration and talk about climate issues that we see going on in the school and actually get those to move. So yeah, it can be frustrating at times, but at the same time, I do recognize the fact that there is a little bit of effort in trying and stuff. So.
Yeah, I like how, you mentioned about compared to other states, we're very lucky to have this. The fact that Youth for Environmental Action exists here in the county, and the fact that we're having this dialogue right now with other adults here who have connections, who have resources to hear us out, is such a big privilege compared to other students and what they're dealing with. So I just like hearing all of you guys talking about your experiences, and hopefully the adults here can listen to our ideas and help us, because for as much as we want to do something about it, we have to be honest with ourselves. We need preparation, and we need that support by other people to mentor us. Yeah, we can learn with all of us together, but we need that guidance. So I think that was worth mentioning. Last question. We heard your ideas. What is the ideal environmental action driven that you see our community building up? And we'll see in a year. What do you vision our community doing?
Within my community, this kind of connects to what Regeneracíon TV was saying with Natalie. And I would like to see more accessible education, and accessible, I mean, in different languages such as Mixteco, Spanish, and other less, spoken languages, and to give at least the people who are affected the most by climate change. And I know people like my mother who works in agriculture harvest experience drastic changes, or have experienced drastic changes over the years. And many, such as my mother, are unaware why things are happening. And specifically with working in agriculture, there are moments where the fruit spoils, there are dangerous heat waves, or the seasons get delayed. And currently, as we approach October, many are afraid that due to the changes in climate change, the next season will not be able to be planted in time due to the plant not surviving the upcoming weather. And so just bringing more accessible education to both the students and the parents of these families, I believe would increase more awareness and greater knowledge, and this will eventually drive change.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I also wanted to connect on something that Natalie said, which is that I think we already have all the solutions to climate change, and they are just not easy solutions. And I think that for a lot of them, we're unwilling to input these solutions, because to do so, we're going to have to uproot our entire system and the way that we live right now. And so I think really the biggest first step is just recognizing that we don't have a choice if we want to have an habitable planet, and that we have a very short period of time to do so, and that we just need to prioritize climate justice in every single thing that we do and every decision that we make. And I also think it's important that we use our political voice, especially those of us who have the privilege to have time to do so. And so I also just wanted to share that October 29th, there's going to be a climate demonstration. And so I'd love to have all of you guys there. And I'm going to put the Youth for Climate Justice email in the chat if you guys want to get involved. But we're definitely going to be protesting, and we are also going to make an effort to highlight BIPOC voices and people who are going to be affected the most.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Azucena and Tamara both said. People are being affected by this right now. Us students are being affected by this now. Our families are being affected by this, and we need to start treating this like a crisis. We can't continue to remain complicit with these systems of injustice that are causing all this harm to the environment. So yeah, really moving forward, that's what I would like to see, is uprooting these systems of oppression. And hopefully then we can actually move towards a future that will be a habitable planet for all of us.
Yeah, and I think I think what as Susanna was saying, with education through students and then kind of webbing that out to families, I think that's like most important to me. But secondly, like something close to me, being someone that has to commute really far, I think like transportation and actually having like accessibility in terms of being able to get like to my school, because it's like a school that actually, it's like one of the best schools in the county. And also just like I'm at the school district where I live is so bad, but my parents can afford to live in Santa Cruz. And so like putting in place an education system a transportation system that's able to get kids to places where like they can learn best, but also just like almost every single kid that can drive at my school drives just themselves pretty much. And so having a transportation system that could really connect all of our communities, I think would be really, really, really important. And that's like something that I definitely miss about living in like a big city.
Thank you guys for sharing all of your experiences and everything. It was really nice hearing everything that's been said. I just want to make a quick note. I feel like it doesn't stop here. I feel like this is a time where we can network and get connected with everyone around here, because we're all a common denominator. We're all passionate about this issue. So I think it would be a great time to just shoot some emails, shoot some contacts on the chat so we can be well-rounded and well-connected.
Thank you so much to our amazing students. If you wouldn't mind giving our students a virtual applause for sharing their stories, for talking to us about what environmental justice means to you, and telling us honestly about what you think the schools need to be doing. I think that I really appreciated hearing about positive things that the schools have been doing in support of students and in support of environmental justice, but also the things that we need to do differently and need to do better. And so I want to really thank you for your courage, for your leadership. When I listen to you speak and I listen to the solutions that you're proposing, it gives me so much hope. And it is also a reminder of a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I just want to say thank you for being here tonight, for speaking your truth, and for participating actively in solutions to be able to make environmental justice a reality. Thank you so much. So we're going to be breaking up into groups at this point, and we're going to be discussing for about 20 minutes. Your groups are going to be facilitated. You're going to have the ability to use your microphone and your camera in just a moment. And for those 20 minutes, we ask you to discuss the following issues. What does environmental justice mean for Santa Cruz County? How can Santa Cruz COE partner with schools to achieve environmental justice in Santa Cruz County? And how do you plan to use the information you learned this evening, and who will you share it with? And so I want to ask our moderator, Berenice, to please put us into different groups to be able to discuss these questions. We'll also be putting them in the chat so that you all have access to the questions when you're discussing them with your facilitators. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. I mean, a lot of what you experienced tonight is kind of pretty standard aspect of how we do our equity series, which is we have amazing speakers as we had tonight. We get to listen to students and who share their opinions, their voice, and then we always have a breakout session to talk about what we're going to do with this information. So we are so grateful that you're here. And as we close, I want to just share a couple of pieces of information. When it comes to some additional opportunities to learn more, we're going to send this to you via email, and you'll see that the Environmental Literacy Integration Educator Networks, which are meetings that take place the first Thursday of the month, and also history and civic and environmental literacy meetups, which are the first Wednesday of the month. We also have for our young people, Youth for Environmental Action for both middle school and high school students. It's an amazing, you saw many of those students speak to us tonight. And Marlise, who is she's now a graduate and now working with us kind of as a mentor. It's a wonderful group of young people that are so inspirational, as you saw tonight. And the Green Schools Working Group, which are district teams that are going to be starting in January. And we have some information about what from the IPCC report, overview for education leaders and 10 ways to take action. And we also have an email there so that you can get involved in the October 29th climate demonstration, Youth Climate Justice California at gmail.com. We want to ask you to please give us feedback about this event. We'd like to know what you thought worked, what didn't work, what you'd like to see differently for next time. So we're going to put this in the chat so that you can help complete and give us some feedback tonight. We do these sessions as much as about every quarter at least. And we have another session that we're going to have in October with a focus on LGBTQ youth and support and for our LGBTQ community. And so we would love it for you to join us. I believe it's on October 6th is our next Equity Series event. And so please fill out the feedback form, tell us what your thoughts are, and your input from the discussions and feedback will be shared with you, and will be shared also with education leaders, including our superintendents and other people involved in this work. So we are so appreciative for your participation. Big shout out to our amazing speakers, Natalie, Chairman Lopez, our students who are absolutely wonderful. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight and sharing the space and working towards environmental justice. Thank you and have a good night.